The stagecoach didn't slow down when it reached Redemption Springs. It just opened its door and threw her out. Not literally, though that would have been kinder. The driver pulled up to the edge of town, stepped down with a grunt, and yanked a battered trunk off the back. Then he reached inside and half-dragged, half-carried a woman out onto the street. She hit the ground hard, dust puffing up around her like smoke. "That's far as I go," the driver said to no one in particular. He climbed back up, snapped the reins, and the coach lurched forward. Within 30 seconds, it was gone, swallowed by the heat haze rising off the desert. The woman didn't move. She lay there in the dirt, one arm twisted beneath her, the other stretched out like she was reaching for something that wasn't there. Her dress, once blue, maybe, was torn at the shoulder and stained dark across the bodice. Her hair, tangled and matted, covered most of her face. Nobody helped her. Redemption Springs wasn't the kind of place where people rushed to help strangers. It was a town that survived on suspicion and pragmatism. You kept to yourself. You minded your business. You didn't waste energy on someone who probably wouldn't make it through the week anyway. A few people glanced over, briefly, then went back to whatever they'd been doing. The blacksmith kept hammering. The woman sweeping the porch of the general store didn't stop sweeping. A kid rolling a hoop down the street swerved around the body, not out of respect, just convenience. It was mid-afternoon, and the sun was merciless. The kind of heat that made your skin feel like it was shrinking, pulling tight against your skull. Flies had already started circling. Then a man stepped out of the shadows. His name was Caleb Mercer, though most folks just called him Mercer. He was tall, taller than most, and built like someone who'd spent his life wrestling livestock and weather and everything else the West threw at him. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, forearms thick with old scars. His hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her. Then he walked over. "Ma'am?" No response. He crouched down beside her, close enough to see the bruises. They were everywhere, dark purple along her jaw, yellowing around her wrists, fresh red marks on her forearms. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. When he gently brushed the hair away from her face, he saw more: a split lip, a swollen eye, dried blood crusted along her temple. Someone had worked her over, badly. Caleb glanced around. A few people were watching now, pretending not to. He ignored them. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. For a second, he thought she might wake up. Then she went still again. He made a decision. Without another word, he slid one arm under her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. She was lighter than he expected, too light. When he lifted her, her head lolled against his chest. "Where you taking her?" someone called out. It was Old Man Rafferty, sitting on a bench outside the saloon with a bottle between his knees. Caleb didn't answer. "You know her?" Rafferty pressed. "No." "Then why?" "Because nobody else is." He carried her down the street, past the cluster of buildings that made up the town's center. People watched, some curious, some disapproving, most just indifferent. Caleb didn't care. He'd stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. His ranch was 3 miles out. He didn't have a wagon in town, so he walked. The woman didn't wake up, didn't make a sound, just hung limp in his arms, fragile as glass. By the time he reached the ranch, his shirt was soaked through with sweat. The house sat in a shallow valley, surrounded by scrub and red rock. It wasn't much: 1 story, wood frame, a porch that sagged on one side. But it was his. Every nail, every board. He'd built it himself after the war, after everything else had fallen apart. He kicked the door open and carried her inside. The interior was dim, cooler. A single main room served as kitchen and living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A narrow hallway led to 2 small bedrooms in the back. Caleb laid her down on the bed in the spare room. She looked even smaller there, swallowed by the rough blankets. He pulled off her boots, worn through at the soles, and covered her with a quilt. Then he stepped back and took a proper look. She was young, mid-20s maybe, hard to tell under all the bruising. Her hands were rough, nails broken. Not a lady, not gentry. Someone who'd worked, who'd known hardship long before whoever did this got hold of her. Caleb went to the kitchen and pumped water into a basin. He grabbed a clean rag, came back, and sat down beside the bed. Carefully, he began cleaning the blood from her face. She stirred. Her eyes opened, barely, and for a moment there was nothing in them, just emptiness. Then fear flooded in, sharp and immediate. She jerked back, trying to scramble away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She got tangled in the quilt and collapsed back onto the bed, gasping. "Easy," Caleb said quietly. He set the rag down, held up both hands. "You're safe." She stared at him, wild-eyed. Her breathing was fast, panicked. "I'm not going to hurt you," he continued, keeping his voice low. "You were left in town. I brought you here. That's all." She didn't respond, just kept staring, like she was trying to figure out if he was lying. "My name's Caleb Mercer. This is my ranch. You're in the spare room. The door's not locked. You can leave anytime you want." Still nothing. He stood up slowly, took a step back. "I'll get you some water." He left the room, giving her space. In the kitchen, he filled a tin cup and stood there for a moment, thinking. He wasn't a fool. He knew what this looked like. Strange man, isolated ranch, woman barely conscious. But he also knew what she looked like. Someone had beaten her half to death and dumped her like trash. And whatever happened next, she at least deserved a choice. When he came back, she hadn't moved, but her eyes tracked him as he approached. He set the cup on the small table beside the bed. "Water, if you want it." She looked at the cup, then at him, then back at the cup. "I'll be in the next room," he said. "If you need anything, just call out." He left, pulling the door halfway closed behind him. Bummed. Eliza didn't touch the water for a long time. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. The last clear memory she had was Victor's fist coming at her face. After that, everything blurred, pain, darkness, voices she didn't recognize. Then the stagecoach. Then nothing. And now this. A stranger's house, a stranger's bed, a stranger who claimed he wasn't going to hurt her. She'd heard that before. Victor had said the same thing, once, back when his smile was warm and his promises sounded real, before everything changed, before she realized that kindness, for some men, was just another tool, something they used to get what they wanted. And once they had it, the kindness disappeared. But this man, Caleb, he'd said, he'd already had plenty of chances to hurt her. She'd been unconscious, helpless. If he'd wanted to do something, he would have done it already. Maybe. Or maybe he was just more patient than Victor. She didn't trust it, couldn't afford to. But she was thirsty. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and the water was right there. She sat up, slowly, because everything hurt, and reached for the cup. Her hands shook. Water sloshed over the rim, soaking her fingers. She didn't care. She drank it down in 3 long gulps, then set the cup back on the table. It was the best water she'd ever tasted. She lay back down, exhausted. Sleep pulled at her, but she fought it. Sleep meant vulnerability. Sleep meant not knowing what was happening around her. But her body didn't care what she wanted. Within minutes, she was out. When she woke again, it was dark outside. A lamp burned low on the table, casting soft light across the room. Someone had been in while she slept. There was a plate beside the lamp. Bread, cheese, some kind of dried meat. Another cup of water. A clean dress folded at the foot of the bed. Eliza sat up, head spinning. She looked at the food. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but suspicion held her back. Why was he doing this? Men didn't help women for no reason. There was always a reason, always something they wanted. But what if there wasn't? She hated that thought, hated the flicker of hope it sparked. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. Still, she was starving. She picked up the bread and tore off a small piece. It was fresh, still soft. She ate it slowly, then another piece. Then the cheese. Then the meat. She didn't realize how fast she was eating until the plate was empty. The door opened. Eliza tensed, pulling the quilt up to her chest. Caleb stepped in, carrying a bucket of water. He stopped when he saw she was awake. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said. He set the bucket down near the door. "Thought you might want to clean up. There's soap in there and a towel." She didn't say anything. He nodded toward the dress. "That belonged to my wife. Thought it might fit better than what you've got on." Wife. Eliza's eyes flicked to his left hand. No ring. Caleb noticed. "She's dead," he said flatly. 3 years now. Silence. "Anyway," he continued, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll be outside if you need anything. Take your time." He left, closing the door behind him. Eliza stared at the bucket, then at the dress, then at the door. She didn't understand this man, but she also didn't have many options. She stood up, legs shaky, and made her way to the bucket. The water was warm. She stripped off her ruined dress, let it fall to the floor in a heap, and began washing. The soap smelled like lye and something else. Lavender, maybe. She scrubbed until her skin was raw, trying to wash away more than just the dirt. When she was done, she pulled on the clean dress. It was too big in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves, but it was soft, and it didn't smell like blood. She felt almost human again. Almost. Caleb sat on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette and staring out at the dark expanse of land. The night was quiet except for the occasional howl of a coyote far off in the distance. He didn't know what he was doing. Bringing her here, that had been instinct. Leaving someone to die in the street wasn't something he could do. But now that she was here, now that she was awake, what next? She'd leave, probably. Soon as she was strong enough. That's what made sense. And maybe that was for the best. Caleb didn't need complications. His life was simple. Work the ranch, keep to himself. Don't think too much about the past. Bringing a stranger into that life was asking for trouble. But then he thought about the way she'd looked at him when she first woke up. The fear in her eyes. The way she'd flinched when he moved. Someone had broken her. And whoever that someone was, they were still out there. The door creaked open behind him. Caleb turned. Eliza stood in the doorway, wrapped in the oversized dress, arms crossed over her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the food and the dress." "You're welcome." She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb took a drag from his cigarette, exhaled slowly. "Because you needed help." "That's not a reason, not in a place like this." "Maybe it should be." She studied him for a long moment, trying to figure out if he was serious or just trying to sound noble. "What's your name?" he asked. "Eliza." "Eliza," he repeated. "You got people, family, anyone we should let know you're here?" She shook her head. "What about whoever did that to you? They gonna come looking?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't know." "That mean yes?" "It means I don't know." Caleb nodded. "Fair enough." Another silence. "I can't pay you," Eliza said. "I don't have anything. Didn't ask you to." "Then what do you want?" "Nothing. People always want something." "Well," Caleb said, flicking the cigarette into the dirt, "I'm not people." Eliza didn't respond. She just stood there, looking small and uncertain and exhausted. "You should rest," Caleb said. "We can figure out the rest tomorrow." She nodded, slowly, and went back inside. Caleb stayed on the porch a while longer, watching the stars. He had a bad feeling about this. The next morning, Eliza woke to the sound of hammering. She sat up, disoriented, then remembered where she was. Sunlight streamed through the small window, warm and bright. She could hear Caleb outside working on something. She got out of bed and walked to the window. From there, she could see him repairing a section of fence near the barn. His shirt was off, slung over a post, and his skin glistened with sweat. Eliza watched for a moment, then turned away. She found her way to the kitchen. It was simple. Table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, shelves lined with canned goods and dried herbs. A pot of coffee sat on the stove, still warm. She poured herself a cup and sat down at the table. Everything felt strange, too quiet, too normal, like the world hadn't just tried to kill her. The door opened and Caleb stepped in, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. "How you feeling?" "Sore." "That'll last a while." Eliza stared into her cup. "How long was I out, before you found me, I mean?" "Don't know. Driver didn't say much, just dumped you and left." "Where was the coach coming from?" "Didn't ask." She looked up at him. "You didn't ask anything?" "Didn't seem like my business." Eliza let out a short, bitter laugh. "You carried a half-dead stranger 3 miles to your ranch, but you didn't think it was your business to ask where she came from?" Caleb shrugged. "Figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." She didn't know what to make of that. "Besides," he continued, "it's not where you came from that matters. It's what you do now." "And what am I supposed to do?" "Whatever you want." "I don't have anything, no money, no belongings." "You have your life, that's something." Eliza wanted to argue, but she didn't have the energy. Instead, she just sat there, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. You can stay here as long as you need, Caleb said. No strings, no expectations. When you're ready to leave, you leave. Why? She asked again. Why are you doing this? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because someone did it for me once. Long time ago. Figured I'd pass it on. He finished his coffee, set the cup in the wash basin, and headed back outside. Eliza sat there alone, staring at the table. She didn't trust him, but she also didn't have a choice. Days passed. Eliza stayed. Not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. Caleb kept his distance. He worked the ranch from dawn until dusk, fixing fences, tending to the few head of cattle he kept, chopping wood, hauling water. When he came inside, he was always polite, always careful. He never touched her, never crowded her, never asked questions she didn't want to answer. It was unnerving. Eliza had spent the last year of her life walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate Victor's moods, trying to avoid setting him off. She'd learned to read danger in the tightness of a jaw, the flex of a hand, the shift in a voice. But Caleb didn't have any of those tells. He was just steady, predictable, boring, almost. And yet, she couldn't relax. She found herself watching him, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting for the moment when his patience ran out and he showed her who he really was. But that moment didn't come. Instead, he just kept being decent. It was infuriating. One afternoon, Eliza found herself standing in the doorway of the barn, watching him brush down a horse. The animal, a large bay mare with a white blaze, stood calm and still under his hands. She have a name? Eliza asked. Caleb glanced over. Red. Creative. Gets the job done. Eliza stepped closer, hesitant. The horse turned its head, eyeing her. She doesn't bite, Caleb said. How do you know? Because I raised her. Eliza reached out slowly and touched the mare's neck. The fur was warm, soft. Red snorted and shifted her weight, but didn't pull away. You ride? Caleb asked. A little. Not in a long time. Want to try? Eliza pulled her hand back. No. All right. He went back to brushing. Eliza stood there, feeling stupid. She didn't know why she'd said no. Didn't know why she was standing there at all. Can I ask you something? She said suddenly. Sure. Why don't you go into town more often? Caleb paused mid-stroke. Don't have much reason to. That doesn't bother you, being out here alone all the time? Used to, he admitted. Not anymore. What changed? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. I got tired of pretending I was fine when I wasn't. Out here, I don't have to pretend. Eliza understood that, more than she wanted to. What about you? Caleb asked. You ever think about going back to wherever you came from? No. Why not? Because there's nothing to go back to. Caleb nodded, like that made perfect sense. Then you build something new. It's not that simple. Never said it was. Eliza crossed her arms. You talk like it's easy, like you just decide to start over and that's it. It's not easy, Caleb said. But it's possible. Big difference. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he didn't know what he was talking about, that starting over wasn't something you just did. But looking at him, at the scars on his hands, the lines in his face, the way he carried himself like someone who'd already been broken once and put himself back together, she realized he probably understood better than most. I should go, she said abruptly. All right. She turned and walked back to the house, feeling his eyes on her the whole way. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor, felt his hands, heard his voice. You're nothing without me. She'd believed him once, believed that she was broken, that she was weak, that she deserved what he did to her. But lying there in the dark, in a stranger's house, she felt something shift. Anger. Not at Caleb, not even at Victor, really. At herself. For believing the lies. For staying as long as she did. For letting him take everything. She sat up, breathing hard. The house was quiet. She could hear Caleb moving around in the other room, probably getting ready for bed. Without thinking, she stood up and walked down the hall. She stopped outside his door, hand raised to knock. Then she stopped. What was she doing? She lowered her hand and turned to leave, but the door opened anyway. Caleb stood there, barefoot, shirt untucked. He looked surprised to see her. You all right? He asked. I don't know, she said honestly. He waited. She hesitated, struggling to find the words. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. Be here. Accept help. I don't know how. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. You're already doing it. No, I'm not. I'm just existing. That's not the same thing. It's a start. Eliza shook her head. You don't understand. I don't know who I am anymore. Victor took everything, my money, my jewelry, even the clothes I brought with me. And when there was nothing left to take, he just threw me away. Then he's a fool. You don't know me. I know enough. She laughed, harsh, bitter. You don't know anything. You just see some broken woman and think you can fix her. I don't think you're broken, Caleb said calmly. I think you got hurt. That's different. Is it? Yeah, broken means you can't be put back together. Hurt just means you need time. Eliza stared at him, throat tight. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that there was something left of her worth saving. But she didn't. I should let you sleep, she said quietly. Eliza. Good night. She turned and walked back to her room, shutting the door behind her. Caleb stood there for a moment, then sighed, and went back to bed. A week later, Caleb came back from town with a letter. He handed it to Eliza without a word. She stared at the envelope. It wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to the woman staying with Mercer. What is this? She asked. Apparently the town's looking for a school teacher. They're asking if you're interested. Eliza blinked. Me? You can read, can't you? Yes, but then you're qualified. I'm not a teacher. Neither was the last one. Didn't stop him. Eliza opened the letter and read it. It was short, formal, and to the point. Redemption Springs needed someone to teach the children. Room and board provided. Modest salary. Interested parties should contact the town council. I can't do this, she said. Why not? Because I don't know anything about teaching. You know how to read. You know how to write. That's more than most of these kids have. That's not enough. It's enough to start. Eliza set the letter down. Why would they even ask me? Nobody in that town knows me. They know you're here. They know you're educated. That's all they care about. Or they just want to run me out of town. If they wanted that, they would have done it already. Eliza shook her head. This is a bad idea. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe it's exactly what you need. And what's that? A reason to stay. She looked at him, searching for the angle. The trick. The moment when this all fell apart. But his face was open. Honest. I don't know if I can do it, she admitted. Then find out. 3 days later, Eliza stood in front of the schoolhouse for the first time. It wasn't much. A single room with a dozen rough-hewn desks, a blackboard nailed to the wall, and a stove in the corner that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The floor was covered in dust, and the windows were so grimy you could barely see through them. But it was hers. If she wanted it. Caleb had driven her into town that morning. He'd offered to come inside with her, but she'd said no. This was something she had to do alone. She stood there for a long time, just looking at the room. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time the sun set, the place was clean. The desks were arranged in neat rows. The blackboard was wiped down. The stove was stocked with wood. She was exhausted. Her hands were blistered, her dress was filthy, and every muscle in her body ached. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than fear. Pride. When Caleb picked her up, he took one look at her and smiled. Looks like you're staying, he said. Eliza climbed into the wagon. Looks like. As they rode back to the ranch, she stared out at the endless expanse of desert and sky. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe this was a start. The first day of school, nobody showed up. Eliza arrived at dawn, nerves rattling in her chest like stones in a tin can. She'd spent the previous night lying awake, rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd introduce herself, what she'd teach first. Caleb had dropped her off just after sunrise, promising to pick her up at sunset. They'll come, he'd said. She'd nodded, not believing him. Now she sat at the teacher's desk, a wobbly thing with one leg shorter than the others, and stared at the empty room. Dust motes drifted through the morning light. Outside, she could hear the town waking up, horses clopping past, voices calling to each other, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. But no children. By mid-morning, she'd convinced herself it was a mistake, that the town council had changed their minds, that she'd been a fool to think anyone would trust her to teach their kids. Then the door opened. A boy stood in the doorway, maybe 8 years old, skinny, with dirt smudged across his cheek and pants torn at the knee. He looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "Is this the school?" he asked. Eliza stood up too fast, knocking a book off the desk. Yes, this is... You're here for school?" "Ma said I had to come." "Well, good. Come in." The boy shuffled inside and sat at the desk closest to the door like he was planning his escape route. He didn't say anything else, just sat there staring at his hands. Eliza waited. Nobody else came. After 10 minutes, she cleared her throat. "What's your name?" "Thomas." "Thomas. That's a good name. I'm Miss Whitmore." He nodded, but didn't look up. "Do you know how to read, Thomas?" "A little. How about numbers?" He shrugged. Eliza took a breath. This was it. This was her chance. One student was better than none. She picked up a piece of chalk and turned to the blackboard. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote the alphabet, each letter careful and deliberate. When she finished, she turned back to Thomas. "Can you tell me which letters you know?" Thomas squinted at the board. A, B, C. "Good. What about this one?" She pointed to the letter M. "Don't know." "That's M. Can you say it?" "M." "Perfect." They went through the alphabet slowly. Thomas knew about half the letters. By the time they reached Z, another child had appeared, a girl with braids and a flour-dusted apron. Then another boy. Then 2 more children together, siblings by the look of them. By noon, there were 7 kids in the schoolhouse. It wasn't much, but it was something. Eliza taught them their letters. She taught them to count to 20. She read them a story from the only book she'd found in the schoolhouse, a battered copy of Aesop's Fables with half the pages missing. The children listened, mostly quiet, occasionally fidgeting. When the sun started sinking toward the horizon, she dismissed them. "Same time tomorrow," she said, trying to sound confident. They filed out one by one. Thomas was last. He paused at the door and looked back at her. "You're not like the last teacher," he said. "Is that good or bad?" He thought about it. "Good, I think." Then he was gone. Eliza sat down at the desk, suddenly exhausted. Her voice was hoarse from talking, her feet hurt from standing, but there was a small, fragile feeling in her chest that she almost didn't recognize. Hope. When Caleb arrived to pick her up, he found her sweeping the floor. "How'd it go?" he asked. 7 students? That's more than yesterday." She smiled despite herself. "That's more than 0. Told you they'd come." They climbed into the wagon and started back toward the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and red. "You did good," Caleb said after a while. "I don't know about that." "I do." Eliza glanced at him. He was looking straight ahead, hands steady on the reins. There was something about the way he said it, simple, matter-of-fact, that made her believe him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for pushing me to do this." "You pushed yourself. I just pointed at the door." They rode in silence for a while. Then Eliza asked, "What did you do before? Before the ranch, I mean." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Different things." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." She wanted to press, but something in his tone told her not to. Whatever he'd done before, whatever he'd been, he'd left it behind, just like she was trying to do. "All right," she said. The rest of the ride passed in comfortable quiet. When they reached the ranch, Eliza helped Caleb unhitch the horse. It was something she'd started doing over the past week, small tasks, little ways to contribute. He never asked her to. She just did. Inside, Caleb made dinner while Eliza corrected a few practice sheets Thomas had attempted. The boy's handwriting was terrible, but he was trying. That counted for something. They ate together at the small kitchen table, beans, cornbread, coffee. Simple food, but filling. "I'm going into town tomorrow," Caleb said. Need to pick up some supplies. You want to ride in together? I thought you didn't go to town much. I don't, but I need nails, and you need school supplies. I can't afford. I didn't ask if you could afford it. I asked if you wanted to ride in together. Eliza set down her fork. Caleb, it's not charity. Consider it an investment. Smarter kids make for a smarter town. Smarter town makes for better neighbors. Everybody wins. She wanted to argue, but she also knew he was right. The schoolhouse had almost nothing. No books, no paper, no pencils. She'd been making do with chalk and old slate boards, but it wasn't enough. All right, she said. Thank you. He nodded and went back to eating. Later that night, Eliza lay in bed and thought about the children, about Thomas and his dirt-smudged face, about the girl with the braids who hadn't said a single word all day, about the siblings who'd shared one slate between them. They deserved better, and for the first time in a long time, Eliza felt like she could give them something. Not much, but something. She fell asleep with that thought warming her chest. The next morning, Caleb and Eliza rode into town together. Redemption Springs looked different in the daylight, less hostile, more tired. People nodded at Caleb as they passed, and a few even nodded at Eliza. She didn't know if it was out of politeness or curiosity, but she took it as a good sign. They stopped at the general store first. It was a cramped, dusty place run by a man named Silas Holt, heavy-set, balding, with spectacles that sat crooked on his nose. Mercer, Silas said when they walked in. Been a while. Need supplies, Caleb replied. For the ranch or the lady? Both. Silas looked at Eliza with open curiosity. So you're the new teacher? I am, Eliza said. Heard you got a few kids to show up. That's something. I'm hoping for more. You'll get 'em. People around here talk. They hear you're decent. They'll send their kids. And if I'm not decent? Silas laughed. Then they'll run you out. But I don't think you got to worry about that. Eliza wasn't sure if that was reassuring or not. She wandered through the store while Caleb talked with Silas about nails and fencing wire. There wasn't much: canned goods, bolts of fabric, a few tools, some medicinal tonics that looked questionable, but tucked in the back corner she found a small shelf of books. Most were damaged, covers missing, pages torn, but they were readable. She picked up a primer on arithmetic and flipped through it. It was exactly what she needed. How much for this? She called out. Silas glanced over. $2. Her stomach sank. She didn't have $2. She didn't have 2 cents. I'll take it, Caleb said. Caleb, no, and whatever else she needs, he continued, ignoring her. Eliza wanted to protest, but the look on his face told her it wouldn't do any good. So she swallowed her pride and picked out 3 more books, a box of chalk, and a ream of paper. When they left the store, arms full of supplies, Eliza said, I'll pay you back. You don't have to. I will anyway. Caleb just shrugged. Suit yourself. They loaded everything into the wagon and headed toward the schoolhouse. Eliza wanted to drop off the supplies before classes started. As they pulled up, she noticed someone standing outside the building. A woman, tall and sharp-featured, wearing a dark dress and a severe expression. Who's that? Eliza asked. Margaret Hutchins, runs the boarding house. Also sits on the town council. Should I be worried? Only if you give her a reason. Eliza climbed down from the wagon. Margaret watched her approach, arms crossed. Miss Whitmore, Margaret said. Her voice was clipped, formal. Mrs. Hutchins, I hear you've started teaching. I have. And how many students are attending? 7 yesterday, hopefully more today. Margaret's expression didn't change. The council would like to observe your teaching to ensure the children are being properly educated. Eliza's stomach tightened. When? This afternoon. I'll be sitting in on the last hour of class. It wasn't a request. Of course, Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. Margaret nodded once and walked away without another word. Caleb came up beside Eliza. Don't let her rattle you. Too late. She does that to everyone. It's her job. Her job is to make people uncomfortable. Her job is to protect the town. Making people uncomfortable just comes with it. Eliza watched Margaret disappear down the street. What if I don't measure up? What if she decides I'm not good enough? Then you prove her wrong. Just like that? Just like that. He handed her the stack of books. "You've got this." Eliza wanted to believe him, but as she carried the supplies into the schoolhouse, doubt crept in. What if she messed up? What if the kids didn't listen? What if Margaret saw through her and realized she had no idea what she was doing? The door opened and Thomas walked in, followed by the girl with braids, whose name, Eliza had learned, was Annie. Then the siblings, Jacob and Ruth. Then 4 more children she hadn't seen before. 11 students today. Eliza set the books down on her desk and took a breath. She could do this. She had to. "Good morning," she said, louder than she felt. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore," they chorused back, some enthusiastic, some mumbled. "Today we're going to work on reading. I've brought some new books, so we'll start with a story. But first, I want to hear from you. Can anyone tell me something they learned yesterday?" Silence. Then Thomas raised his hand. The letter M. "That's right. Good, Thomas. Anyone else?" Annie raised her hand slowly. "Numbers." "Excellent. We're going to keep building on that today." Eliza picked up one of the new books, a collection of folk tales, and began to read aloud. The children listened, some more attentively than others. When she finished the first story, she asked them questions. What happened? Who were the characters? What did they learn? A few hands went up, then more. Soon they were talking over each other, excited, engaged. Eliza felt something shift inside her. This was working. It was actually working. The morning flew by. They practiced writing their names. They counted to 50. They learned about animals and plants and weather. And then, just as Eliza was feeling confident, the door opened. Margaret Hutchins stepped inside. The room went quiet. Margaret didn't say anything. She just walked to the back of the room, sat down in one of the empty desks, looking absurd. A grown woman folded into a child's seat and watched. Eliza's mouth went dry. Every lesson plan she'd had evaporated from her mind. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then Thomas coughed. Eliza snapped back. Right. The children. They were waiting. "All right," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Let's review what we learned this morning. Who can tell me what comes after the number 49? A hand shot up. 50! Good. And after 50? 51. They kept going, counting together. Eliza wrote the numbers on the board as they called them out. She could feel Margaret's eyes on her, dissecting every word, every movement. But the children didn't seem to care. They were focused, energetic, proud of what they knew. After numbers, they moved to reading. Eliza had each child stand and read a sentence from the book. Some stumbled, some needed help, but they all tried. When the lesson ended, Eliza dismissed the class. The children filed out, chattering amongst themselves. Margaret remained seated. Eliza waited, heart pounding. Finally, Margaret stood. She walked to the front of the room and looked at the blackboard, at the books on the desk, at the neat rows of chairs. "You're not formally trained," Margaret said. "No, ma'am." "And you have no prior teaching experience." "No, ma'am." Margaret turned to face her. "But you're effective. The children are learning. That's what matters." Eliza blinked. "So, you may continue. The council will revisit this arrangement in 3 months. If progress continues, your position will be made permanent." "Thank you." Margaret nodded and walked toward the door. Then she paused. "One more thing, Miss Whitmore." "Yes?" "Don't let Caleb Mercer become a distraction. This town needs a teacher more than it needs gossip." Before Eliza could respond, Margaret was gone. Eliza stood there, stunned. A distraction? What did that even mean? The door opened again. Caleb stepped in, hat in hand. "Saw Margaret leave," he said. "How'd it go?" "She said I could stay. For now." "Told you." "She also said you were a distraction." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" "What did she mean by that?" "Margaret sees trouble everywhere. Don't worry about it." But Eliza did worry about it, because she knew how small towns worked. People talked. They watched. They judged. And the last thing she needed was for people to start asking questions about her arrangement with Caleb. That evening, after Caleb dropped her back at the ranch, Eliza sat on the porch and watched the sun set. She felt restless, unsettled. Everything was moving too fast. A month ago, she'd been lying in the dirt, half dead. Now she was a teacher, living with a man who wasn't her husband, building something that felt dangerously close to a life. It scared her. because she knew how quickly things could fall apart. The door creaked open and Caleb came out, carrying 2 tin cups. He handed one to her, coffee, still hot. "You're thinking too loud," he said, sitting down beside her. "Margaret said something today about us, about people talking. People always talk." "That doesn't bother you?" "Not particularly." "Well, it bothers me." Caleb sipped his coffee. "Why?" "Because I don't want anyone thinking—" She stopped, frustrated. "I don't want people assuming things." "What things?" "You know what things. Eliza, anyone with eyes can see this is a temporary arrangement. You're getting back on your feet. Once you've saved enough, you'll get your own place. That's it." "Is it?" He looked at her. "What are you really asking?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. The truth was, she didn't know what she felt about Caleb. Gratitude, yes. Respect, maybe. But beyond that, it was murky, confusing, and the more time she spent here, the harder it became to imagine leaving. That terrified her. "I should go inside," she said abruptly, standing up. Caleb didn't stop her. That night, Eliza lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Victor, about the way he'd started, charming, attentive, kind, and how slowly, so slowly she didn't notice until it was too late, he'd changed. Caleb wasn't Victor, she knew that. But fear didn't care about logic. The weeks passed and the school grew. Word spread that the new teacher was competent, maybe even good. More children started showing up. By the end of the month, Eliza had 18 students, ranging from age 6 to 14. She developed a routine. Wake at dawn, ride into town with Caleb, teach until late afternoon, ride back, help with chores, eat dinner, sleep, repeat. It was exhausting, but it was also the most alive she'd felt in years. The children were starting to trust her. Thomas brought her a drawing one day, a crude sketch of a horse. Annie finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. Jacob and Ruth stopped fighting long enough to work together on a math problem. Small victories, but they mattered. One afternoon, as Eliza was cleaning the blackboard, the door opened. She turned, expecting a parent, or maybe one of the kids who'd forgotten something. Instead, she saw a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and cold eyes. He looked around the room slowly, taking everything in. "Can I help you?" Eliza asked, keeping her voice steady. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just curious, heard there was a new teacher in town." "I'm Miss Whitmore." "Whitmore," he repeated, like he was tasting the name. "You from around here?" "No." "Where you from?" Eliza's chest tightened. "Nowhere in particular." The man stepped closer. "That's a funny answer. I'm afraid I have work to do, if there's nothing else. You traveling alone when you got here?" Her pulse quickened. "That's none of your concern." "Maybe it is. Maybe I'm looking for someone. Someone who ran off with something that didn't belong to her." Eliza's blood turned to ice. The man watched her reaction and his smile widened. "Thought so." "Get out," she said, her voice shaking. "Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble, just passing through. But Victor might want to know where you ended up. He's been looking, you know." Victor. The name hit her like a fist. "You tell him," Eliza said, forcing the words out, "that I don't have anything of his. I never did." "That's not what he says." "I don't care what he says." The man shrugged. "Suit yourself. But you might want to watch your back." Victor's not the forgiving type. He tipped his hat and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Eliza stood there, shaking. Her hands were numb. Her mind was racing. Victor knew where she was, and if he knew, he'd come. She grabbed her coat and ran outside, looking for Caleb. He was supposed to pick her up soon, but she couldn't wait. She needed to move, to do something, to— "Eliza!" She spun around. Caleb was standing beside the wagon, concern etched across his face. "What happened?" "He found me," she said, voice breaking. "Victor, he knows I'm here." Caleb's expression darkened. "Who told you that?" "A man. Just now. He came into the schoolhouse and—" "What did he look like?" She described him, and Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's one of Hale's men. Works for him sometimes." "Who's Hale?" "Runs a crew out of Silver Ridge. Not someone you want involved in your life." "Well, he's involved now." Caleb took her by the shoulders, gentle but firm. "Listen to me. Victor's not coming here. Not yet. He's testing you, seeing if you'll run. Maybe I should. No. Caleb, no, he repeated, harder this time. You run now, you'll be running forever. Is that what you want? I don't want him to hurt anyone because of me. He won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She pulled away from him. You can't promise that. I can. And I am. Eliza looked at him. This man who'd saved her, who'd given her a chance, who stood there now like he was willing to fight the entire world if it came to that. And she realized, with a clarity that hurt, that she couldn't let him. I need to leave, she said quietly. No, you don't. Yes, I do, before someone gets hurt. Eliza, please, she said, her voice cracking. Just take me back to the ranch. I need to think. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. They rode back in silence, the weight of Victor's name hanging between them like a storm cloud. When they got back to the ranch, Eliza went straight to her room and shut the door. Caleb didn't follow. He stood in the kitchen for a while, then went outside to work on the fence line even though the sun was already setting. Inside, Eliza paced, back and forth across the small room until she'd worn an imaginary path in the floorboards. Her mind was spinning, catastrophizing every possible scenario. Victor showing up in town, Victor finding the schoolhouse, Victor hurting Caleb, Victor hurting the children. She sat down on the edge of the bed and put her head in her hands. Running made sense. It's what she should do. Pack whatever she could carry, leave before dawn, head west or south or anywhere that wasn't here. Disappear again. Start over somewhere else. Except she'd already started over, here, in this town, with those children, and with Caleb. She hated that the last part mattered. Hated that somewhere along the way, without meaning to, she'd started depending on him. Not just for shelter or safety, but for something harder to name. Stability, maybe. Or just the simple fact that he'd kept every promise he'd made. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Eliza? Caleb's voice was quiet. Can I come in? She didn't answer right away. Then, yes. He opened the door but stayed in the doorway, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. In his hands was a tin cup. Coffee, she assumed. Or maybe tea. Thought you might want this, he said, holding it out. She took it. Whiskey, not coffee. The smell was sharp and medicinal. I don't drink, she said. Tonight you might want to. She looked at him, then at the cup. Then she took a small sip. It burned going down, but it also steadied something inside her. Caleb sat down in the chair by the window, giving her space. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Eliza said, I can't stay here. You can. Not if it puts you in danger. I've been in danger before. Not because of me. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Let me tell you something about men like Victor. They're bullies, and bullies only have power if you're scared of them. I am scared of him. I know, but you don't have to be alone in it. You don't understand. Victor doesn't just threaten, he follows through. So do I. The way he said it, flat, certain, sent a chill through her. Not fear, something else. What does that mean? She asked. It means if Victor shows up, he'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, Eliza, that's not going to be easy for him. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that wasn't his fight. But looking at him sitting there, jaw set, eyes hard, she realized he'd already made up his mind. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Because it's the right thing to do. That's not a reason. It's the only one I've got. She shook her head. You said that before, about why you helped me in the first place. But there's more to it than that. There has to be. Caleb was silent for a long time. Then he said, My wife, Sarah, she died 3 years ago. Eliza went still. She got sick, he continued, his voice rough, started with a cough, turned into something worse. By the time we realized how bad it was, there wasn't anything anyone could do. She was gone in 2 months. I'm sorry. He waved it off. Point is, I couldn't save her. I tried everything. Brought in doctors from 3 towns over, spent money I didn't have on medicines that didn't work. None of it mattered, and when she died, I blamed myself. Thought if I'd been smarter, faster, richer, something, I could have stopped it. He looked at Eliza then, really looked at her. But I couldn't, because some things you can't control. Death's one of them. But this? He gestured vaguely. Victor coming after you, that's something I can do something about. So I'm going to. Eliza's throat tightened. That's not fair to you. Probably not, but it's what I'm doing anyway. She didn't know what to say, so she just sat there, holding the cup of whiskey, feeling the weight of his words settle around her. I don't want you to get hurt, she said finally. I won't. You can't promise that. Watch me. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Almost. Get some rest, Caleb said, standing up. Tomorrow we'll figure out a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that makes sure Victor knows coming here is a bad idea. He left, closing the door behind him. Eliza sat alone in the dark, staring at the whiskey. Then she drank the rest of it in one long swallow and lay down, hoping sleep would come. It didn't. The next morning, Caleb didn't take her into town. Instead, he saddled up Red and rode off before dawn, saying only that he'd be back by afternoon. Eliza wanted to ask where he was going, but something in his expression stopped her. So she stayed at the ranch, cleaned, baked bread even though she wasn't hungry, fed the chickens, tried not to think about what Caleb was doing or where he'd gone. By mid-morning, she couldn't stand it anymore. She walked out to the barn and found the old mare, the one Caleb called Daisy, too old for hard work but still steady. Eliza saddled her up, moving slowly because she hadn't done it in years, and rode into town. The schoolhouse was locked when she arrived, but she had the key Caleb had made for her. Inside, everything was just as she'd left it. Books stacked neatly, blackboard wiped clean, desks in perfect rows. She sat down at her desk and tried to plan lessons for the next day, but her mind wouldn't focus. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound from outside made her jump. Miss Whitmore? She looked up. Thomas was standing in the doorway, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Thomas, what are you doing here? There's no school today. I know, Ma sent me, said to give you this. He walked over and set the bundle on her desk. When Eliza unwrapped it, she found fresh bread, still warm, and a jar of preserves. Your mother didn't have to do this, Eliza said. Thomas shrugged. She said you've been looking tired, said everyone needs help sometimes. Something about the simple kindness of it hit her harder than it should have. She blinked back sudden tears. Tell your mother thank you. This is very kind. Thomas nodded and turned to leave. Then he stopped. Miss Whitmore, is it true that man came here yesterday, the one asking about you? Word traveled fast in small towns. Yes, Eliza admitted. Ma says you should be careful. Says men like that don't come around unless they're looking for trouble. Your mother's right. Are you in trouble? She wanted to lie, but Thomas was looking at her with those wide, serious eyes, and she couldn't. Maybe, she said, but I'm working on it. Mr. Mercer will help you, Thomas said confidently. He's good at fixing things. How do you know that? He fixed our plow last summer when Pa couldn't. Didn't ask for nothing, just did it. Ma says he's a good man. Eliza smiled despite herself. She's right about that too. Thomas left, and Eliza sat there with the bread and preserves, feeling the strange warmth of community wrapping around her. These people, Thomas and his mother, the other families who'd started trusting her with their children, they were counting on her. She couldn't just run away from that, but she also couldn't let them get hurt because of her past. The door opened again. This time it was Margaret Hutchins, expression as stern as ever. Miss Whitmore, I heard about the incident yesterday. Eliza stood up. News travels fast. It does when strangers start asking questions about our school teacher. Margaret stepped inside and closed the door behind her. I want to know what's going on. It's personal. It stopped being personal the moment it involved this town. Eliza bristled. I haven't done anything wrong. I didn't say you had, but that man wasn't here by accident. So I'll ask again, what's going on? For a moment, Eliza considered lying, making up some story that would satisfy Margaret without revealing the truth. But she was tired of lying, tired of hiding. I left someone, she said quietly. A man I was traveling with. He was not a good man. When I left, he didn't take it well. And now he's looking for you. Yes. Margaret studied her. Did you steal from him? No, he stole from me. But I doubt he sees it that way. What did he take? Everything I had. Money my parents left me, jewelry, even the clothes I'd brought. When there was nothing left, he beat me and left me for dead. Margaret's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. And the man yesterday? Works for him, I think. Came to let me know Victor knows where I am. Victor, that's his name? Victor Hale. Margaret's face went cold. Hale. He runs with a rough crowd out of Silver Ridge. So I've heard. And you think he'll come here? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You should have told us this from the beginning. Would you have hired me if I had?" "No, but that doesn't change the fact that you brought danger to our town." "I know. That's why I'm thinking of leaving." "Don't." Eliza blinked. "What?" "Don't leave. The children need you, and frankly, you need them. But if Victor comes, if Victor comes, we'll handle it. This town survived worse than one angry man. You don't know him, and he doesn't know us." Margaret moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Caleb Mercer. You trust him?" "Yes." "Good, because he's the kind of man who'll stand between you and trouble without thinking twice. Don't waste that." She left before Eliza could respond. Eliza sat back down, head spinning. She'd expected judgment, maybe even expulsion from the town. Instead, Margaret had told her to stay, to fight. Maybe running wasn't the answer after all. When Caleb finally returned that afternoon, he looked tired but satisfied. He found Eliza sitting on the porch of the schoolhouse, waiting. "Where did you go?" she asked. "Silver Ridge." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" "To get information. Needed to know who we're dealing with." "And?" "Victor's there. Got himself a room at a boarding house, drinking heavy, asking about you. Sounds like he's working himself up to something." "So he is coming." "Eventually, but not yet. He's scared." "Victor's not scared of anything." "He's scared of me." Eliza looked at him. "What did you do?" "Let it be known that if he shows up in Redemption Springs, he won't leave in one piece." "Caleb, relax. I didn't touch him. Just made sure the right people heard the message. Word'll get back to him." "That's only going to make him angrier." "Maybe, but it'll also make him think twice." Eliza stood up, frustrated. "This isn't your fight." "You keep saying that, but I keep not caring." "Why?" She was almost shouting now. "Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything." "I know that. Then why?" He stepped closer, and for the first time since she'd known him, his composure cracked. "Because I couldn't save Sarah. Because I stood there and watched her die, and there wasn't a single thing I could do about it. And maybe that's not your problem. And maybe it's not fair, but I'm not going to stand by and watch someone else get hurt when I can actually do something about it. So yeah, this is my fight now. Deal with it." The words hung in the air between them, raw and unfiltered. Eliza's anger drained away, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or just the recognition that they were both broken in different ways, and somehow that made them fit together. "All right," she said quietly. "But we do this smart. No unnecessary risks." "Agreed. And you let me help." "Eliza, I mean it. If this is happening, I'm not hiding behind you. We face it together." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but then he nodded. Together, they rode back to the ranch as the sun set. The tension between them shifted into something more like partnership. Over the next week, things settled into an uneasy rhythm. Eliza continued teaching. The school kept growing, 22 students now. She threw herself into the work, finding refuge in lesson plans and spelling tests, and the simple joy of watching children learn. But beneath the surface, she was always waiting for Victor to show up, waiting for everything to fall apart. Caleb, meanwhile, became more vigilant. He started carrying his rifle everywhere, even into town. He talked to people, the blacksmith, the saloon owner, even Old Man Rafferty, making sure everyone knew to watch for strangers. The town responded, closing ranks in the way small communities do when one of their own is threatened. And somewhere along the way, Eliza had become one of their own. One evening, as she and Caleb sat on the porch after dinner, she said, "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For believing I could do this." "You did it yourself." "No, you pushed me. If you hadn't, I'd probably still be lying in bed waiting to die. Caleb looked at her. You're stronger than you think. I'm starting to believe that. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Then Eliza asked, "What was she like, Sarah?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Then, "Stubborn, kind, terrible cook." Eliza smiled. "Sounds like a good match for you." She was. "Do you miss her?" "Every day. But it's different now. The pain's still there, but it doesn't control me like it used to." "What changed?" He looked at her. "You did." Eliza's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she should say anything at all. Before she could figure it out, Caleb stood up. "I should check on the horses." He left, and Eliza sat there alone, heart pounding. Something had shifted between them, something neither of them had named yet, and it terrified her. Because caring about someone meant giving them power to hurt you, and she'd already been hurt enough. 3 days later, Victor came. It was late afternoon. Eliza was dismissing the children when she heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the sound of a horse being reined in hard. She stepped out of the schoolhouse and froze. Victor was there, sitting on a horse in the middle of the street. He looked worse than she remembered. Thinner, meaner, with hollowed-out eyes and a mouth twisted into something ugly. People had stopped to watch. Margaret Hutchins stood on the steps of the boarding house. Silas Holt was in the doorway of his store. The blacksmith had set down his hammer. Everyone was watching. Victor's eyes locked onto Eliza. "There you are." Her legs felt like water, but she forced herself to stay upright. "What do you want, Victor?" "What do I want?" He laughed, sharp, bitter. "You stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. You took everything I had." "That's not how I remember it." "I don't care how you remember it. Leave." He climbed down from the horse, moving with exaggerated slowness. "You think you can just walk away, start a new life like nothing happened?" "Yes, that's exactly what I think. You're mine, Eliza. You don't get to decide when we're done." "I'm not yours." "I never was." He took a step closer. Eliza held her ground, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "You're coming with me," Victor said. "Right now." "No." Wasn't a question. He reached for her, and then Caleb was there. He stepped between them so fast Eliza barely saw him move. One moment Victor's hand was coming toward her. The next Caleb had grabbed his wrist and twisted, forcing Victor back. "She said no," Caleb said quietly. Victor yanked his arm free, stumbling. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone you don't want to mess with. This is between me and her." "Not anymore." Victor's face twisted with rage. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake here is you thinking you can ride into my town and threaten people." "Your town?" Victor laughed. "You don't own this place." "Maybe not, but I know these people, and they know me. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on that horse, ride out of here, and never come back." "And if I don't?" Caleb's expression didn't change. "Then you'll find out what happens when you push me too far." For a moment, nobody moved. The whole street was holding its breath. Then Victor's hand dropped to his belt, to the gun there. Everything happened at once. Caleb's hand shot out, grabbing Victor's wrist before he could draw. There was a brief struggle, Victor trying to pull free, Caleb holding firm. Then Caleb's other fist connected with Victor's jaw, a solid hit that sent him sprawling into the dirt. Victor lay there for a moment, dazed. Blood trickled from his split lip. "Stay down," Caleb said. But Victor didn't stay down. He pushed himself up, breathing hard, eyes wild. His hand found the gun. He pulled it. The shot rang out before Eliza could scream, but the bullet didn't hit anyone. Victor's aim was off, wild with anger and alcohol. The shot went wide, splintering wood on the side of a building. Caleb moved fast. He closed the distance, knocked the gun from Victor's hand, and drove his fist into Victor's stomach. Victor doubled over, gasping. "I said stay down!" This time, Victor did. He collapsed onto his hands and knees, coughing, wheezing. The sheriff, a man named Tom Garrett, who Eliza had seen around town but never spoken to, pushed through the crowd. He was older, gray-haired, with a weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanor. "What's going on here?" Garrett demanded. "This man," Caleb said, not taking his eyes off Victor, "came here to threaten Miss Whitmore. Then he drew on me. Garrett looked at the gun lying in the dirt, then at Victor, then at the crowd. Anyone else see it that way? Several people nodded. Margaret stepped forward. He drew first. Mercer was defending himself. Garrett sighed and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. All right, Hale. You're under arrest. For what? Victor spat. Assault. Disturbing the peace. Attempted murder if Miss Whitmore wants to press charges. Victor's eyes shot to Eliza. You wouldn't dare. She met his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. Yes, she said clearly, I would. Garrett hauled Victor to his feet and cuffed him. As he led him away, Victor kept twisting around, trying to look back at Eliza. This isn't over, he shouted. You hear me? This isn't over. But his voice was already fading, swallowed by distance and defeat. Eliza stood there, shaking. The crowd began to disperse, people murmuring to each other. A few approached her, Silas, Margaret, Thomas's mother, offering quiet words of support. Through it all, Caleb stayed beside her, not touching, just present. When everyone else had left, he finally turned to her. You all right? She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed. A strange, broken sound. I don't know. That's fair. He's really gone? For now. What happens next? Garrett'll hold him for a few days. Then there'll be a trial, probably. He drew a weapon in front of witnesses. That's serious. What if they let him go? They won't. Not after what everyone saw. Eliza wanted to believe him. But fear had been her companion for so long, she didn't know how to let it go. Come on, Caleb said gently. Let's get you home. Home. The word felt strange, but also right. They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Eliza went straight to her room and lay down, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. She'd done it. She'd faced Victor and hadn't backed down. So why did she still feel so scared? A knock at the door. Eliza, you hungry? No. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. Silence. Then, can I come in? She didn't answer, but she heard the door open anyway. Caleb sat down in the chair by the window, same as he had before. You did good today, he said. I didn't do anything. You did. You stood up to him. That's something. It doesn't feel like enough. It is. She turned her head to look at him. What if he comes back? What if... He won't. And even if he does, we'll handle it. Together, remember? Together. That word again. Eliza sat up slowly. Why do you keep saying that? Because it's true. But why? Why do you care so much? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger I was helping. You became someone He stopped. Someone important. Her heart was hammering. Important how? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't let herself see before. I think you know how, he said quietly. And she did. She'd known for a while, if she was honest, but hearing it, or almost hearing it, made it real in a way that terrified her. Caleb, I can't. I know, and I'm not asking you to. I'm just telling you the truth. He stood up and moved toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. He left, and Eliza sat there alone, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her. Because the truth was, she felt it too. Whatever was growing between them, friendship, trust, something more, it was there. Real and undeniable. And that scared her more than Victor ever could. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Eliza lay in the dark, replaying the confrontation over and over. Victor's face, the gun. Caleb stepping in front of her without hesitation. And then those words at the end, the ones that had cracked something open inside her chest. Someone important. She knew what he'd meant, knew what he'd almost said. And the worst part was that she felt it too. This pull toward him that had nothing to do with gratitude or dependence and everything to do with the way he looked at her like she was more than just broken pieces. But wanting something didn't make it safe, didn't mean it wouldn't end badly. She'd wanted Victor once, believed his promises. And look where that had gotten her. When dawn finally broke through the window, Eliza gave up on sleep. She got dressed and walked to the kitchen, expecting to find Caleb already up, coffee made, ready to start the day. Instead, the kitchen was empty. She found him outside, sitting on the porch steps with his rifle across his knees, staring out at the horizon. He hadn't slept either, she could tell. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. "You've been out here all night," she said. He didn't turn around. Someone had to. "Victor's in jail. For now." "Caleb, I'm not taking chances." He finally looked at her. "Not with you." There it was again. That weight in his voice, the one that made her chest feel too small. She sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while they just sat there in the gray pre-dawn light, not talking. Then Eliza said, "About what you said last night. Forget it." "I can't." "Then don't." "But I'm not expecting anything, Eliza. I just needed you to know." "Know what, exactly?" He was quiet. Then, "That you matter. That what happens to you matters to me." She wanted to tell him he was crazy, that caring about her was a mistake, that she was too damaged, too scared, too much of a risk. But instead she said, "You matter to me too." His head turned, eyes searching hers. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just nodded and went back to watching the horizon. They sat there until the sun came up, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Eliza felt something close to peace. The next few days were strange. Victor remained in jail, awaiting trial. The town buzzed with gossip, people who'd seen the confrontation retelling it with varying degrees of accuracy. Some painted Caleb as a hero. Others whispered that Eliza was trouble, that she'd brought violence to their quiet town. Eliza tried to ignore it. She focused on teaching, on the children who still showed up every day despite everything. Their parents trusted her enough to keep sending them, and that meant something. But the whispers followed her anyway. In the general store, conversations would stop when she walked in. On the street, people would nod politely but hurry past. Only a few, Margaret, Silas, Thomas's mother, treated her the same as before. One afternoon, as Eliza was cleaning the blackboard after class, Margaret came in. "You holding up all right?" Margaret asked. "Depends on the day. People are talking." "I know." Margaret sat down at one of the desks, looking oddly out of place. "Most of it's just noise. They'll move on to something else eventually." "And until then?" "Until then, you keep your head up and do your job. That's all you can do." Eliza set down the rag and turned to face her. "Why are you helping me? You don't owe me anything." "No, I don't. But I've seen what happens when good people get run out of town by gossip and fear. And you're good at what you do. These kids need that more than they need another scandal to chew on. Some people think I'm the scandal. Some people are idiots." Margaret stood up. "There's a town meeting next week. Council's discussing the budget for the school. You should be there. Will they try to remove me?" "They might. Or they might see sense. Either way, you show up and you make your case. Understood?" Eliza nodded. "Understood." Margaret left, and Eliza stood alone in the schoolhouse, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her again. She'd fought so hard to build something here. The idea of losing it now, after everything, was almost unbearable. That evening, when Caleb picked her up, she told him about the meeting. "They're not going to remove you," he said. "You don't know that. I know the people on that council. They're practical. You're doing good work. They won't throw that away. Unless they think I'm more trouble than I'm worth." Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "Then I'll make them see otherwise." "How?" "I'll talk to them, remind them what you've accomplished, how many kids are actually learning now." "Caleb, you can't fight all my battles for me. I'm not fighting them for you. I'm fighting them with you. There's a difference." She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. So she just leaned back against the wagon seat and watched the landscape roll by. When they got back to the ranch, Caleb made dinner, beans and salt pork, same as always. They ate in silence, the unspoken tension from the night before still hanging between them. Finally, Eliza set down her fork. "I need to ask you something." "All right. When all this is over, when Victor's trial is done and the town decides whether to keep me, what happens then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean with us. With this." She gestured vaguely at the house, the table, the space between them. "I can't stay here forever." "Why not?" "Because it's not appropriate. People already talk." "Let them." It's not that simple. Caleb pushed his plate away. Why do you care what people think? Because I have to live here. I have to work here. And if people think there's something inappropriate going on, then what? They'll what exactly? Fire you for living somewhere safe, for having a friend who gives a damn whether you live or die? You're more than a friend, and you know it. The words came out before she could stop them. Caleb went very still. Am I? He asked quietly. Eliza's heart was pounding. She'd said too much, revealed too much. But there was no taking it back now. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what you are, but it's not just friendship, not anymore. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I told myself I wouldn't do this, wouldn't put pressure on you. You've been through enough without me adding to it. You're not adding to it. No? He turned to face her. Because I'm pretty sure if I say what I'm thinking right now, it's going to complicate things. Then say it anyway. He crossed back to the table, leaning against it, close enough that she had to tilt her head up to look at him. I care about you, he said, not like a friend, not like someone I'm helping out of pity. I care about you the way a man cares about a woman he wants in his life. Permanently. Eliza's breath caught. And I know it's too soon, he continued. I know you're not ready. Hell, I'm probably not ready either. But that's how I feel. So if that makes things complicated, then I'm sorry. But I'm not going to lie about it. She stared at him, torn between wanting to run and wanting to close the distance between them. Her hands were shaking. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to trust this. I know. Victor said he cared about me too. At the beginning. Before everything went wrong. I'm not Victor. I know that. But my brain doesn't. Every time I start to feel something, every time I think maybe this is real, I panic. Because what if it's not? What if you change? What if I'm wrong about you? Caleb crouched down in front of her chair so they were eye level. You want to know the truth? You might be wrong. People change. I could turn out to be a disappointment. Or you could. Or we could just be two people who don't fit as well as we thought. That's the risk. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to be honest. I can't promise you a perfect future, Eliza. Nobody can. But I can promise that I'll try. Every single day. And if that's not enough, then it's not enough. But it's all I've got. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the scars on his hands, the lines around his eyes, the steadiness in his gaze. He meant it, every word. And that terrified her. I need time, she said finally. Take all the time you need. But I can't stay here while I figure it out. It's not fair to you. Where else are you going to go? I don't know. Maybe I can find a room in town. Margaret runs a boarding house. You're not moving into a boarding house. Caleb, no. You want time, you've got it. You want space, I'll give you that too. But you're not moving out because people might gossip. You're safe here. That matters more than talk. Does it? To me it does. Eliza felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back, angry at herself for being so weak. I don't deserve this, any of it. You helping me, the town giving me a chance, those kids trusting me. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, but you've got it anyway. So what are you going to do about it? She didn't have an answer, so she just sat there, feeling the weight of his words settle around her like a blanket. Eventually, Caleb stood up. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another day. He left her alone in the kitchen, and she sat there until the lamp burned low, thinking about risks and trust and the terrifying possibility of letting someone in. The next week passed in a blur. Eliza taught during the day, went through the motions, smiled at the children, corrected their work. But her mind was elsewhere, caught between fear and hope and the impossible question of what she actually wanted. The town meeting came on a Friday evening. The council convened in the back room of the saloon, the only space large enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. And apparently, everyone wanted to attend. Eliza arrived with Caleb. Margaret was already there, sitting near the front with a notebook and a stern expression. Silas sat a few rows back. Sheriff Garrett stood near the door, arms crossed, and scattered throughout the room were townspeople, some curious, some clearly there to judge. The council consisted of 5 members: Margaret, Silas, a rancher named Josiah Kent, the saloon owner, Dutch Riley, and a widow named Clara Perkins, who ran the town's only bakery. Josiah called the meeting to order. They went through mundane business first: road repairs, water rights, a dispute over cattle grazing. Eliza sat there, nerves wound tight, waiting. Finally, Josiah said, "Last item, the school." The room shifted, people leaning forward. "We've had concerns raised," Josiah continued, "about the current teacher, specifically about her qualifications and her situation." "What situation?" Margaret asked sharply. "The incident last week with Victor Hale. Some folks are worried that keeping Miss Whitmore on might bring more trouble to town." "Victor Hale drew a weapon in the middle of the street," Margaret said. "That's not Miss Whitmore's fault." "Maybe not, but she's the reason he came here. She's also the reason 23 children are learning to read and write, something this town's been needing for years." Dutch Riley spoke up. "Margaret's got a point. My nephew's been attending. Says he likes it. First time he's ever said that about school." "That's fine," Clara Perkins said. Her voice was thin, reedy. "But we also have to think about the town's reputation. People are talking." "People always talk," Silas said. "Doesn't mean we should listen." Josiah held up a hand. "Let's hear from Miss Whitmore herself. She's here. Give her a chance to speak." All eyes turned to Eliza. She stood up, legs shaky. For a moment her mind went blank. Then she saw Thomas sitting with his mother near the back, watching her with those wide, trusting eyes. That steadied her. "I know I'm not what you expected," she began. "I don't have formal training. I don't have credentials. All I have is a willingness to try. And for the past few months I've been trying. Every single day, I show up, I prepare lessons. I work with each child at their own pace. And you know what? They're learning." She looked around the room. Thomas couldn't read when I started. Now he can. Annie wouldn't speak. Now she does. Jacob and Ruth fought constantly. Now they help each other. That's not because I'm special. It's because someone finally paid attention. "What about Victor Hale?" Claire asked. Eliza took a breath. "Victor Hale is my past. A past I was trying to escape when I came here. Yes, he followed me. Yes, it caused a scene. But I didn't bring him here intentionally, and I did everything I could to handle it quietly. It's not my fault he forced a confrontation." "And if he comes back?" Josiah asked. "He won't. He's facing charges, and even if he did, that's a problem for the law, not the school." Caleb stood up. "If I may." Josiah nodded. "I've known Eliza for a few months now," Caleb said. "She's honest. She works hard. And she's exactly what this town needs. You all know I don't get involved in town business. But this? This matters. You let her go because of gossip. You're making a mistake." "This isn't just gossip, Mercer," Clara said. "She's living at your ranch, unmarried. That's not proper. She's living in my spare room because she had nowhere else to go. If that bothers you, then maybe we should talk about why this town doesn't have better options for people in need." Clara's face pinched. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Margaret snapped. "We need a teacher. She's a good teacher. Everything else is noise." The room erupted into arguments, people talking over each other, some defending Eliza, others raising objections. Josiah banged his hand on the table. "Enough. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of keeping Miss Whitmore as the town school teacher?" Margaret's hand went up immediately. Then Silas's. Dutch Riley hesitated, then raised his. 3 votes. Josiah and Clara didn't raise their hands. A tie. Josiah sighed. "In the event of a tie, the decision falls to me as head of the council." The room went silent. He looked at Eliza for a long moment. Then he said, "Miss Whitmore stays, on one condition." "What condition?" Eliza asked. "You find proper lodging within the next 2 months. I don't care where, but it needs to be appropriate. No more living at Mercer's ranch. Agreed?" Eliza felt her stomach drop. 2 months. She had 2 months to find somewhere else to live or lose her job. "Agreed," she said quietly. Josiah nodded. Then it settled. Meeting adjourned. People began filing out, some looking satisfied, others disappointed. Eliza stood there, feeling numb. Margaret came over. "You did well. Don't let Clara get to you. She's been trying to stir up trouble since her husband died." 2 months, Eliza said. "How am I supposed to find a place in 2 months?" "We'll figure something out. I might have a room available in the boarding house. We'll talk." She left, and Eliza turned to find Caleb waiting by the door. They walked out together into the cool night air. Neither spoke until they were in the wagon, heading back toward the ranch. "I'm sorry," Eliza said finally. For what? For this becoming such a mess. For dragging you into it. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to be here. Still, you shouldn't have to defend me to the whole town. Why not? You'd do the same for me. She looked at him. Would I? Yeah, I think you would. They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the ranch, Caleb helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. 2 months, he said. That's not much time. I know. Margaret's boarding house is full. Everyone knows that. So what am I supposed to do? Caleb looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You could stay. Caleb, not like now, different, proper. Her heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we stop pretending this is temporary. Maybe we make it official. Official how? He took a breath. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying and completely unexpected. You can't be serious, Eliza whispered. I'm completely serious. Caleb, we haven't even, I know, and maybe it's crazy, but think about it. You need somewhere to live. The town needs you to be respectable. And he stopped, started again. I want you here, not as a guest, as my wife. Eliza felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. That's not a reason to get married. It's not the only reason, but it's a start. You're asking me to marry you so I can keep my job? No, I'm asking you to marry me because I care about you, because I think we could be good together, and because the alternative is you moving into some cramped room and us pretending we don't feel what we feel. She pulled her hand away, stepping back. I can't think about this right now. Then think about it later. But you've got 2 months. And I'm not going to watch you lose everything you've built because people are too small-minded to see what's right in front of them. He turned and walked toward the barn, leaving her standing there alone. Eliza went inside, her mind spinning. Marriage. He'd asked her to marry him. It was insane. They barely knew each other. She was still healing from Victor. He was still mourning Sarah. But the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that some small traitorous part of her wanted to say yes. Not because it was practical, not because it solved her problems, but because when she thought about leaving this ranch, about not seeing Caleb every day, about building a life that didn't include him, it hurt. And she didn't know what to do with that. For 3 days, Eliza didn't give Caleb an answer. She couldn't. Every time she opened her mouth to say something, yes or no, it didn't matter which, the words stuck in her throat like bones. They moved around each other carefully during those days, like two people trying not to set off a trap. Caleb didn't push, didn't bring it up, just went about his work, same as always, while Eliza taught her classes and came home and lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do. Marriage. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Dangerous. Like something that could save her or destroy her depending on which way the wind blew. She'd been married before, technically. Not legally, but in the way that mattered to Victor. He'd called her his wife. Said they'd make it official someday. Used that promise to control her, to take everything she had, to justify every bruise and broken promise. So the idea of doing it again, of putting herself in that position, even with someone like Caleb, made her skin crawl. But then she'd watch him chopping wood in the yard or cooking dinner without complaint, or checking the locks on the doors every night to make sure she was safe. And she'd think maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be like that at all. On the 4th day, Margaret showed up at the ranch. Eliza was hanging laundry when the wagon pulled up. Margaret climbed down, moving with her usual brisk efficiency, and walked straight over without preamble. We need to talk, Margaret said. About? About your living situation. I've been asking around. There's no available rooms in town. Mrs. Patterson was going to rent out her attic, but her son moved back from Denver last week. The Johnsons have space, but they've got 6 kids already and another on the way. The Blackwells offered their barn loft, but that's not proper lodging by any reasonable standard. There's nowhere for you to go. Eliza's stomach sank. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it real, made it immediate. So what am I supposed to do? Eliza asked, her hand still on the wet sheet she was hanging. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, Caleb asked you to marry him, didn't he? Eliza's hand stilled on the laundry. How did you? I'm not blind. And neither is anyone else who's paying attention. The way he looks at you, the way he defended you at that meeting, the way he's been walking around town these past few days like a man waiting for a verdict, it's obvious. It's not that simple. It never is. But sometimes simple is overrated. Eliza turned to face her fully. You think I should say yes? I think you should do whatever keeps you here, because whether you believe it or not, this town needs you. Those children need you. And from what I've seen, you need them too. And what about what I need beyond that? What do you need, Eliza? The question hit harder than it should have, because the truth was, Eliza didn't know. She'd spent so long just trying to survive, to make it through each day without falling apart, that she'd forgotten how to want things for herself. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Not much, but enough. Then maybe it's time to figure it out. You've got 6 weeks left. After that, the council will vote again. And if you're not in proper lodging, they'll have no choice but to let you go. Clara Perkins has already been talking about bringing in someone from back east, someone with credentials. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's reality. So you need to decide, are you going to fight for what you've built here, or are you going to let fear win? She left before Eliza could respond, climbing back into her wagon and driving off in a cloud of dust. Eliza stood there, holding a wet sheet, feeling the weight of Margaret's words settle over her like a stone. Fear. That's what it came down to, wasn't it? She was scared. Scared of trusting again, scared of being wrong, scared of giving someone the power to hurt her. But she was also scared of losing the life she'd started to build. The school, the children, the sense of purpose she'd found. And yes, Caleb too. And maybe that was the real problem. Not that she didn't want to marry him, but that she did. That night, after a silent dinner where neither of them seemed to know what to say, Eliza found Caleb in the barn, brushing down red. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him work, gathering her courage. Caleb? He turned, brush in hand. Yeah? Can we talk? He set down the brush immediately. Of course. She walked in, stopping a few feet away. The barn smelled like hay and leather and horse, familiar and grounding. She'd come to love this smell over the past months, though she'd never admit it out loud. I've been thinking, she started, then stopped, started again. About what you asked. About marriage. He waited, expression carefully neutral. Not pushing, just listening. I can't give you what you want, she said, the words coming out in a rush. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know how to be someone's wife. I don't know how to trust that. Every time I think about it, I panic. Because the last time I trusted someone, the last time I let someone that close, it nearly killed me. And I can't. I don't know if I can survive that again. Eliza. But, she interrupted, needing to finish before she lost her nerve, I also don't want to leave. This place. This life. It's the first thing that's felt right in a long time, maybe ever. The children, the teaching, this town, this ranch, you. And I hate that I'm in this position. I hate that I have to choose between my job and my fear, but mostly I hate that I don't have a real answer for you. So what are you saying? I'm saying I don't have an answer, not a real one. But I'm also saying I'm willing to try. If you're patient, if you can give me time to figure out if I can actually do this, yes? She blinked. What? Yes. I'll be patient. I'll give you time, as much as you need. But the council deadline, let me worry about the council. Caleb, if we don't get married, I'll have to leave. There's nowhere else for me to go. We'll figure something out. How? Margaret just told me there's no rooms available. And even if there were, I can't afford them on a teacher's salary. I've been saving, but it's not enough. He stepped closer, and she could see the determination in his eyes. Then we'll build you a place. A small cabin on the edge of town. I'll do the work myself if I have to. That would take months. So we'll petition the council for an extension. Tell them the situation. They're not unreasonable. Some of them are. Then we'll convince the ones who aren't. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hands. Listen to me. If you say yes, it's going to be because you want to. Not because you have to. Not because you're backed into a corner. Because you actually want to build a life with me. Understood? Eliza felt something crack open in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or just the smallest sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Understood, she whispered. He stepped even closer, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he just reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle and careful. We'll figure it out, he said. Together. That word again. Together. It should have scared her. Instead, it felt like an anchor. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. They stood there in the dim barn, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. And for the first time in days, Eliza felt like she could breathe properly. The next week brought news that changed everything. Victor's trial was scheduled to begin. Eliza was called to testify. She'd known it was coming, had been dreading it, but when the summons actually arrived, delivered by Sheriff Garrett himself, her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. You don't have to do this alone, Garrett said. He was a decent man, she'd learned. Fair. The kind of lawman who actually cared about justice instead of just keeping the peace. I'll be there. So will the prosecutor. And if you want someone else there for support, that's allowed too. Caleb, Eliza said immediately. I want Caleb there. Done. The trial was set for the following Monday, 3 days away. Eliza tried to prepare herself, but how did you prepare to face the man who'd nearly destroyed you? How did you stand in front of a room full of strangers and tell them about the worst moments of your life? The night before the trial, she couldn't sleep. She paced her room until well past midnight, then gave up and went to the kitchen. She found Caleb already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. He looked up. No. She sat down across from him. I'm terrified. I know. What if they don't believe me? What if Victor lies and they believe him instead? They won't. Too many people saw what happened. Too many witnesses. But before that, the things he did before we got here, it's just my word against his. Your word is enough. Is it? Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. Listen to me. You are the strongest person I've ever met. You survived things that would have broken most people. You rebuilt yourself from nothing. You stood up to him when he came back. You are going to walk into that courtroom tomorrow, and you are going to tell the truth, and he is going to pay for what he did. Do you hear me? Eliza's eyes filled with tears. What if I fall apart? Then you fall apart, and then you get back up. Because that's what you do. That's who you are. She squeezed his hand, holding on like he was the only solid thing in the world. Will you sit where I can see you during the testimony? I'll be right there, the whole time, I promise. She nodded, taking a shaky breath. Okay. They sat there for a long time, hands joined across the table, neither speaking. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Sometimes just being there was enough. The courthouse the next morning was packed. Apparently, Victor's trial was the most interesting thing to happen in Redemption Springs in years. People filled every available seat, craning their necks to get a better view. Eliza saw familiar faces: Margaret, Silas, Thomas's mother, even some of her students' parents. The support should have been comforting. Instead, it made her more nervous. All these people, about to hear the worst parts of her story. Caleb sat in the front row, directly in her line of sight, just as he'd promised. Every time she looked at him during her testimony, he was looking right back, steady and solid. The prosecutor was a thin man named Albright, brought in from Silver Ridge specifically for this trial. He was efficient, methodical, walking Eliza through her story piece by piece. Miss Whitmore, when did you first meet Victor Hale? About 2 years ago in St. Louis. And what was the nature of your relationship? At first he was charming, attentive. He said he was a businessman, that he had prospects out west. He courted me properly, asked my permission for everything. I thought... She swallowed hard. I thought he was a good man. When did that change? Gradually, after we'd been traveling together for a few months. He started getting angry over small things. He'd accuse me of flirting with other men when I was just being polite. He'd go through my belongings when he thought I wasn't watching. Then the money I'd brought started disappearing. Your own money? Yes. An inheritance from my parents. About $3,000. I kept it in a case. One day I checked, and half of it was gone. When I asked him about it, he said he'd invested it, for our future. But he couldn't tell me where or in what. Did he return the money? No. And then more disappeared. By the time we reached Colorado territory, it was all gone.
along with my mother's jewelry, my good dresses, everything of value I owned. And when you confronted him?
Eliza's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He hit me. Not hard that first time. Just a slap. He apologized immediately, said he'd been drinking, said it would never happen again. I believed him. But it did happen again. Yes, it got worse. He'd hit me for talking back, for looking at him wrong, for burning dinner, for anything, really, or sometimes for nothing at all. Did you try to leave? Once. In Silver Ridge. I made it to the edge of town before he found me. He dragged me back to the boarding house and... Her voice broke. She looked at Caleb. He nodded encouragement. He beat me unconscious. When I woke up, he was gone, along with everything we had left. He'd taken the horse, the wagon, even my shoes, left me with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. The boarding house owner found me and called the doctor. When I could travel, he paid for my passage on a stagecoach heading west. That's how I ended up in Redemption Springs. Half dead in the street, Albright said. Yes. And when Victor Hale came to Redemption Springs weeks later, he tried to take me back, said I belonged to him, drew a gun when Mr. Mercer intervened. In front of multiple witnesses. Yes. Albright nodded. No further questions. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. A man named Sutton, greasy-looking, with a voice that grated. He tried to make Eliza look like a liar, like a woman scorned, like someone who'd stolen from Victor instead of the other way around. But she held firm. Every time he twisted her words, she corrected him calmly. Every time he called her a liar, she repeated the truth. By the end of it, she was exhausted. But she'd done it. She'd told her story without falling apart. Victor was called to testify next. He sat in the witness chair looking thinner than Eliza remembered, hollowed out by anger and alcohol. When he spoke, his voice was bitter. He called Eliza a thief, said she'd seduced him, taken his money, run off when she got bored, said he'd come to Redemption Springs to get back what was his, meaning Eliza herself, as if she were property. Said Caleb had attacked him unprovoked. It was all lies, obvious, transparent lies. The jury, 12 men from Redemption Springs and the surrounding towns, didn't look convinced. When Sheriff Garrett testified about the confrontation in the street, about Victor drawing his weapon first, about the multiple witnesses who confirmed it, Victor's attorneys started to look worried. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Assault, attempted murder, theft, unlawful discharge of a firearm. Victor was sentenced to 12 years in the territorial prison. When the verdict was read, he lunged toward Eliza, screaming obscenities, calling her every vile name he could think of. But the deputies grabbed him before he got close. They dragged him out while he thrashed and shouted that she'd pay for this, that he'd come for her when he got out, that she'd never be safe. But his voice faded as they hauled him away, swallowed by distance and the heavy doors of the courthouse. Eliza sat there, shaking, feeling like a weight she'd been carrying for years had suddenly been cut loose. Caleb was beside her in an instant, pulling her into a hug. She let herself lean into him, finally allowing herself to believe it was over. He's gone, Caleb said quietly into her hair, for good this time. 12 years, Eliza whispered. 12 years minimum. Could be longer with his behavior. You're safe now. You hear me? You're safe. She nodded against his chest, not trusting her voice. Outside the courthouse, people approached to offer congratulations and support. Margaret squeezed her shoulder. Silas tipped his hat. Thomas's mother hugged her tight and whispered, "You're braver than you know." Eliza didn't feel brave. She felt wrung out, hollowed, like she'd survived something that should have killed her. But she'd survived. That was the important part. That night, back at the ranch, Eliza slept better than she had in months. No nightmares. No waking up in a cold sweat. Just deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window, and she could hear Caleb moving around in the kitchen. She got up, dressed, and found him making breakfast. Eggs and bacon, coffee already brewed. "Morning," he said when she appeared. "How do you feel?" "Different." "Good different or bad different?" "I'm not sure yet. Just different." He slid a plate of food in front of her. "That's fair." They ate in comfortable silence. Then Eliza said, "The deadline is in 3 weeks." "I know." Margaret was right. There's nowhere for me to go. I told you.
We'll figure something out. How, Caleb? How are we going to figure this out? He set down his fork.
By being honest, by telling the council exactly what's going on, by asking for an extension while we build you proper lodging. And if they say no, then what? Then we deal with it, one way or another. She wanted to press him, to demand a real answer, but she could see in his eyes that he didn't have one. He was just as lost as she was. The only difference was that he refused to give up. Later that day, Caleb rode into town to speak with the council members individually. He was gone for hours. When he finally came back, his expression was grim. "Well?" Eliza asked. "Margaret's on our side, so is Dutch Riley. Silas could go either way. Josiah and Clara are firmly against any extension." "So that's it then? I have 3 weeks to find somewhere to live or I lose my job." "Not necessarily." "What do you mean?" Caleb took a breath. "I floated another option, one that would satisfy the council's requirement for proper lodging without forcing us into anything before you're ready." "What option?" "We get married, legally, but we treat it as a practical arrangement. Separate bedrooms, no expectations. Just a solution to a problem. You keep your job, you keep living here, and if you're ready for it to be more than that, we figure it out then." Eliza stared at him. "You want us to have a marriage in name only? If that's what you need, then yes." "That's not fair to you." "Let me worry about what's fair to me." "Caleb, listen," he said, moving closer. "I meant what I said before. I want to marry you for real. I want to build a life with you. But if you're not ready for that, I'd rather have you here as my wife in name only than not have you here at all. So if that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do." She didn't know what to say. The offer was generous to the point of being almost absurd. What man would agree to a marriage with no expectation of anything beyond cohabitation? But looking at Caleb, at the sincerity in his eyes, she realized he meant every word. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. You've got 3 weeks." She wanted to laugh at the irony. 3 weeks to decide her entire future, no pressure. Over the next week, Eliza threw herself into teaching with almost manic energy. Anything to avoid thinking about the decision looming over her. But at night, alone in her room, she couldn't escape it. Marriage, even a practical one, even one with no expectations. It still felt like a trap. But then she'd think about the alternative. Leaving Redemption Springs, leaving the children, starting over somewhere else, alone, with no money and no prospects. And that felt worse. She was caught between 2 impossible choices, and time was running out. 10 days before the deadline, Eliza was cleaning the schoolhouse after class when someone knocked on the door. She turned to find Annie standing there, holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Miss Whitmore? Ma wanted me to give you this." Eliza took the package, confused. "What is it?" "Something for your wedding, if you have one. Ma says every bride needs something old." Annie left before Eliza could ask any more questions. Inside the package was a handkerchief, delicately embroidered with small flowers. A note was pinned to it. "This was my mother's. She'd want you to have it. You've given our children so much. Let us give you this small thing in return." Eliza felt tears prickling at her eyes. The gesture was simple but profound. These people, this town, they cared about her. They wanted her to stay. That night she found Caleb on the porch, same as always. "Can I ask you something?" she said, sitting down beside him. "Of course." "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because it's the right thing to do. There's more to it than that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "After Sarah died, I was lost. I went through the motions of living, but I wasn't really alive. I was just existing, waiting for something to make sense again. And then you showed up. And at first, yeah, I helped you because it was the right thing to do. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being someone I was helping and started being someone I couldn't imagine not having around." He turned to look at her. "You make me want to try again, to build something, to believe that maybe there's more to life than just getting through each day. And maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm asking too much. But I'd rather be honest about it than pretend I'm some selfless hero." Eliza's heart was pounding. "You're not selfish." "Maybe not, but I'm not selfless either. I want you here because having you here makes my life better. Is that a good enough reason?" "I don't know, is it? You tell me." She looked at him, really looked at him, at the scars on his hands from years of hard work, at the lines around his eyes from squinting at the sun, at the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and worth protecting. And she realized something. She trusted him, not blindly, not completely, but enough. Enough to take a chance, enough to try. "Ask me again," she said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "Ask me to marry you, properly this time." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He stood up, then held out his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. "Eliza Whitmore," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me?" She took a breath, let it out. "Yes." His eyes widened. "Yes?" "Yes, not because I have to, not because it's practical, but because I want to, because you're right. Having you in my life makes it better. And I'm tired of being scared, so yes, I'll marry you." A smile broke across his face, genuine, unguarded, happy. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Eliza let herself fall into it, into him, into the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of a future. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning. "We should probably tell people," Eliza said, slightly breathless. "Probably." "Margaret's going to say I told you so." "Definitely." "And Clara Perkins is going to have opinions." "Without a doubt." "Are we really doing this?" "Looks like it." They stood there on the porch, holding each other, and Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. They were married 3 weeks later on a crisp autumn morning when the sky was impossibly blue and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. The ceremony was small, just the council members, a handful of townspeople, and the children from Eliza's school who insisted on being there. Margaret helped Eliza get ready, lending her a dress that had belonged to her daughter. It was a little too big in the waist and a little too short in the hem, but Eliza had never felt more beautiful. Thomas gave her a drawing he'd made. 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. The figures had enormous smiles, and the sun had rays shooting off in every direction like fireworks. "That's you and Mr. Mercer," Thomas explained seriously. "And that's you being happy." Eliza cried and hugged him tight. Annie sang a song she'd learned, her voice small but clear and sweet. It was slightly off-key, and she forgot some of the words halfway through, but nobody cared. Jacob and Ruth presented them with a pair of handmade candlesticks that looked like they might fall apart if you breathed on them too hard. The craftsmanship was terrible, but the intention was pure. Eliza cried through the whole thing. Caleb didn't cry, but his hand shook slightly when he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, the one that had belonged to his mother, passed down through generations. His voice was steady when he said his vows, but Eliza could hear the emotion underneath. When the minister, a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through, pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her gently, sweetly, like she was something precious. The children cheered so loud it startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. Afterward, there was a small gathering at the saloon. Dutch Riley provided the drinks, lemonade for the kids, whiskey for the adults. Clara Perkins baked a cake, grudgingly, but when Eliza thanked her, Clara's face softened slightly. "Just don't make me regret supporting this," Clara muttered. "I'll try my best." Margaret gave a surprisingly warm toast about second chances and stubborn people who were too dumb to quit when any sensible person would have given up. It was perhaps the nicest thing Eliza had ever heard her say. Eliza stood there, surrounded by people who'd become something like family, and felt a peace she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Later, when they returned to the ranch, now truly their home, Caleb carried her over the threshold. He was laughing at the absurdity of the tradition, but doing it anyway because it mattered to her. Inside, everything looked the same, but also completely different. "So," Caleb said, setting her down carefully, "Mrs. Mercer. That's going to take some getting used to. You've got time, lots of it." She looked around the house, at the worn furniture, the stone fireplace, the table where they'd shared so many meals. Then she looked at Caleb, at this man who'd saved her life in more ways than one. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For believing I was worth the trouble. For being patient when I needed it. For pushing me when I needed that instead." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "You were never trouble. You were always worth it. every single moment. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise, and Eliza let herself believe it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this happiness. That night, they talked for hours. About their fears, about their hopes, about what came next. Caleb told her she could keep the spare room as long as she needed, that there was no pressure, no expectations. "I want to try," Eliza said finally, "to be a real wife, not just in name, but I need you to be patient with me. I need you to understand that I might panic sometimes, that I might need space. I can do that. And I need you to promise that you'll tell me if I'm doing something wrong. If I'm not, enough." "Eliza," he took her hand, "you're already more than enough. But yes, I promise. We'll talk. We'll figure things out together. That's what marriage is, right? Figuring it out as you go?" "I hope so, because I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I, so we're even." They spent their wedding night talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, beginning to build something new. It wasn't perfect. Eliza did panic when Caleb reached for her at one point, and he immediately backed off, giving her space. But they worked through it. They talked about boundaries and comfort and what she needed to feel safe. And slowly, over the weeks and months that followed, those boundaries began to shift. Not because she was forced, but because she wanted them to. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still hard days. Days when Eliza woke up from nightmares about Victor, when the fear came rushing back and she couldn't shake it. Days when Caleb got quiet and distant, lost in memories of Sarah that he couldn't quite let go of. Days when they fought about stupid things, money, chores, whose turn it was to feed the chickens. But they worked through it, together. The school continued to grow. By the end of the first year of their marriage, Eliza had 35 students and was training an assistant teacher, a young woman named Grace who'd moved to town with dreams of making a difference. Grace was enthusiastic but inexperienced, and Eliza found herself enjoying the role of mentor more than she'd expected. Caleb expanded the ranch, buying more cattle, hiring help when the work got too heavy. The house was still small, still creaky, but they fixed it up room by room, added a real porch with a swing, replaced the leaky windows, built a proper chicken coop that didn't fall apart every time the wind blew. And slowly, carefully, they built a life. It was during the second year of their marriage that Eliza first suspected she might be pregnant. She'd been feeling tired, slightly nauseous in the mornings, sensitive to smells. She didn't say anything at first, not wanting to get Caleb's hopes up if she was wrong. But one evening, he found her standing in the kitchen, hand pressed to her stomach, lost in thought. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up at him. "I think I might be pregnant." He went very still. "You think?" "I'm not sure, but all the signs are there. The tiredness, the nausea, the..." She gestured vaguely. "Everything." Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug. "We're going to have a baby." "Maybe. We don't know for certain yet." "We will. And when we do, we're going to be a family. An even bigger family. We're already a family." "I know. But now we're going to be a family with tiny humans who cry at 3 in the morning and throw food and need constant attention. Are you ready for that?" He pulled back to look at her. "Honestly, I'm terrified, but I'm also more excited than I've been about anything in a long time." Eliza felt tears welling up, happy tears this time. "I'm scared too. What if I'm not a good mother? What if I mess everything up?" "Then we'll figure it out. Together, like we always do." That word again, together. It had become their anchor, their promise, their way forward. 2 weeks later, the doctor confirmed what they'd suspected. Eliza was pregnant. About 2 months along, he estimated. Healthy. Everything looked good. Caleb was beside himself with joy. He immediately started making plans, building a cradle, fixing up a corner of their bedroom for the baby, talking about names. Eliza let herself get caught up in his enthusiasm, even as fear lurked at the edges. She'd never thought she'd have this. A husband, a home, a child. It felt too good, too perfect, like something that could be taken away at any moment. But the months passed and the baby grew and nothing terrible happened. Her students' parents threw her a small celebration. Margaret knitted tiny booties. Even Clara Perkins softened enough to offer advice about childbirth and caring for infants. The birth, when it finally came 6 months later, was hard. Eliza labored for 14 hours, screaming and crying and cursing Caleb's name more than once. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Howard, remained calm throughout, guiding Eliza through each contraction, each push. Caleb stayed by her side the whole time, letting her squeeze his hand until it went numb, murmuring encouragement even when she yelled at him to shut up. And then finally, after what felt like an eternity, the baby came. A girl. Tiny, red-faced, absolutely perfect. The midwife cleaned her off and placed her in Eliza's arms, and the entire world seemed to stop. Eliza looked down at her daughter, at this impossible, miraculous, terrifying thing she'd created, and felt something shift inside her. A fierce protectiveness unlike anything she'd ever experienced. A love so overwhelming it was almost painful. "She's beautiful," Caleb whispered, leaning in close to look at their daughter. "She's wrinkly," Eliza said, but she was smiling through her tears. Beautiful and wrinkly, perfect. They named her Sarah Rose, after Caleb's first wife and Eliza's mother. It felt right, honoring the past while building something new. A bridge between what was and what would be. Sarah Rose Mercer, their daughter, their future. The first few months were brutal. Neither of them had any idea what they were doing. Sarah cried constantly, especially at night. Eliza was exhausted, sore, overwhelmed. Caleb tried to help, but he was just as clueless. They muddled through, made mistakes, learned from them, slowly figured out what worked and what didn't. Eliza took a break from teaching that first year, focusing on the baby. Grace stepped up to handle the school full-time, proving herself more than capable. When Eliza finally returned part-time, bringing Sarah with her sometimes, the children were fascinated by the baby. Thomas, now 12 and suddenly mature, helped watch her during lessons. Life became a juggling act. Teaching, motherhood, maintaining the ranch, being a wife. Some days Eliza felt like she was drowning, but Caleb was always there, steady as ever, helping however he could. The years passed. Sarah Rose grew from a baby into a toddler, then into a child with opinions and questions and an alarming talent for getting into trouble. She had Caleb's stubbornness and Eliza's curiosity, a combination that led to frequent adventures and occasional disasters. When Sarah was 3, Eliza became pregnant again. This time it was easier somehow, maybe because she knew what to expect. The birth was faster too, though no less intense. A boy this time. They named him Daniel, after Caleb's father, and then their family was complete. The school continued to thrive. Grace had taken on a second assistant, and they'd expanded the schoolhouse twice. What had started as a single room with 7 students had become a proper school with over 60 children and 3 full-time teachers. Eliza served as the head teacher, overseeing curriculum and training, while still teaching advanced classes for the older students. The town grew too. New families moved in, drawn by the promise of opportunity and community. Redemption Springs transformed from a dusty outpost into a real town with a main street, proper buildings, and a growing sense of identity. Eliza and Caleb grew with it. Their ranch expanded, their family settled into routines. Life became less about surviving and more about living. But it wasn't easy. It was never easy. There were setbacks. A drought one year that killed half their cattle. A bout of influenza that swept through the town and claimed several lives. Moments when old fears resurfaced and Eliza found herself panicking over nothing. But they survived. Together. One evening, years later, Eliza stood on the porch watching the sun set over the desert. Sarah Rose and Daniel were inside, supposedly doing their homework, but probably getting into some kind of mischief. Caleb was in the barn, finishing up the day's work. Eliza thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived. Broken. Terrified. Convinced she didn't deserve anything good. And then she thought about the woman she was now. A teacher, a mother, a wife. Someone who'd built something meaningful out of nothing. The journey hadn't been straightforward. There'd been detours and setbacks and moments when she'd wanted to give up. But she'd kept going, kept fighting, kept believing that maybe, just maybe, she deserved a chance at happiness. And now standing here with the weight of her life behind her and the promise of tomorrow ahead, she knew she'd been right to believe. The door opened behind her. Caleb stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He came to stand beside her, their shoulders touching in that comfortable way they'd developed over the years. "You're thinking too loud," he said, a smile in his voice. Just remembering. Good memories or bad? Both. Mostly good. He slipped an arm around her waist. Any regrets? She leaned into him. Not a single one. Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts. Those are what got us here. Inside, Sarah called out, asking for help with something. Daniel immediately protested that he needed help too. The sounds of childhood, chaotic, demanding, absolutely perfect. I'll get it, Caleb said, kissing her temple before heading inside. Eliza stayed on the porch a moment longer, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dust and home. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd imagined when she was younger and full of naive dreams. But it was hers. Hard-won. Built from ashes and determination. And it was good. She thought about the girl who'd been thrown from a stagecoach, left to die in the dirt of an unforgiving town. That girl had believed she was nothing, believed she deserved the pain, believed that survival was the best she could hope for. But that girl had been wrong. Because sometimes, when everything falls apart, when you hit rock bottom and can't imagine getting back up, that's when you find out what you're really made of. That's when you discover that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about choosing every single day to fight for something better, to believe you deserve more than just existing. Eliza had fought, had chosen, had believed, and she'd won. Not because she was special, not because she was strong from the beginning, but because she'd been willing to try, to trust, to accept help when it was offered, to build something new from the ruins of what came before. The door opened again. This time, both children tumbled out, Sarah dragging Daniel by the hand. "Mama, come inside," Sarah demanded. "Papa says we can have dessert if you say yes." "Is that so?" "Please? We were good today. Mostly." Eliza laughed and let herself be pulled inside, into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of her life. Behind her, the desert stretched out endlessly under the darkening sky. Quiet. Eternal. Indifferent to human struggles. But inside this house, in this moment, surrounded by the people she loved and who loved her back, Eliza had everything she'd ever needed. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Sarah Rose was grown and preparing to leave for school back east, she asked Eliza about her past, about how she'd come to Redemption Springs, about Victor and Caleb and everything that came after. Eliza told her the truth. All of it. The ugly parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're the bravest person I know." Eliza shook her head. "I'm not brave. I was just stubborn enough to keep going when giving up would have been easier." Isn't that the same thing? Maybe it was. Eliza had never thought about it that way. "The point is," Eliza said, taking her daughter's hand, "life is going to knock you down. Sometimes hard enough that you don't think you can get back up, but you can. You always can. And when you do, you'll be stronger for it." "Did you ever forgive him, Victor?" Eliza considered the question. "No, but I stopped letting him define me. That's better than forgiveness." Sarah nodded, understanding in a way only the child of survivors can understand. "You're going to do great things," Eliza said. "I know it." "How do you know?" "Because you're your father's daughter, stubborn and determined, and you're mine too, smart enough to know when to ask for help, and brave enough to accept it when it's offered." Sarah hugged her tight. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart. Always." After Sarah left for the station, Eliza found Caleb in the barn, same place he'd been that day she'd agreed to marry him all those years ago. He looked older now, gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes, but still steady. Still solid. Still the man who'd saved her life by refusing to look away. "She's going to be fine," he said without turning around. "I know." "So why do you look like you're about to cry?" "Because our baby is leaving. She's 19, hardly a baby. She'll always be my baby." He turned and pulled her into a hug. "Fair enough." They stood there in the quiet barn, holding each other, feeling the weight of time and love and everything they'd built together. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Eliza asked. "If you hadn't helped me that day?" "Sometimes. but not in a useful way. This is what happened. This is the life we built. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even the hard parts? Especially not those. They made us who we are. Eliza pulled back to look at him. You know what the best part is? What? We're not done yet. There's still more to come. More years. More memories. More life. He smiled. That sounds pretty good to me. Me too. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. Because that's what they did. That's who they'd become. Two broken people who'd found each other in the dust and decided to build something beautiful. And they had. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, through pain and fear and countless moments of doubt, they had built something beautiful. A home, a family, a legacy. And that, in the end, was everything.